Okay, so many of you guys know that I'm a huge fan of the Dark Angels. They're my favorite Space Marine Legion and chapter, and that isn't going to change. But one thing that I think is cool about Warhammer 40k is you have the freedom and ability to create your own Astartes chapters or Sisters of Battle orders or Imperial Guard regiments. You have the ability to be creative and make your own homebrew stuff. And as a writer, I obviously have tried my hand at this. I've tried making my own Imperial Guard regiment, I've tried making my own Sisters of Battle, and of course, I've tried making my own Astartes chapter. And today what I want to do, after finally having it win on the polls, and after me talking about it incessantly, today I want to talk to you guys about my successful homebrew Astartes chapter, one that me and Lark are both very proud of and are even writing a short story about called Serpents and Rats. We're going to talk about the Black Cobras. Today we're going to talk about how they're designed, what we designed them to look like. We're going to talk about their history and how they came to be, their fighting style, their beliefs, what's unique about them. I really can't wait to dive into it, so let's get started. Welcome everybody to Crash Course Warhammer, where me and my brother Lark talk about Warhammer 40k and all the cool stuff in it and share it with you guys. We're going to have a great time today. Today we're going to talk about my homebrew Astartes chapter. Now before we jump into this, a couple things that I do want to say. At some point, I'm going to make a video where I tell you guys my tips and tricks to making your own homebrew Astartes and what you need to think about when designing them, but that's not today. Today, I just want to go into the Black Cobras, kind of what I came up with them, and what I'm super proud of. So there's a lot to go over. Bear with me. Let's go into it. First, let's start with the design. The design of the Black Cobras is pretty simple. The color scheme for the Cobras is pretty simple. They have an ebony black armor set with crimson red shoulder pauldrons. Now, their tertiary color is a deep bronze color that runs along the lining of their pauldrons and armor segments. And almost all the Cobras wear cowls or hoods over their helms that are black in color in reference to the hooded Cobras that they venerate. The exceptions to this are the librarians of the Cobras, who do not follow the conventional codex rule of blue armor. Instead, they wear a deep Eshin gray and their hoods are white. The emblem of the Cobras depicts a hooded Cobra coiled up and ready to strike. And they wear this on their pauldron as a mark of their chapter. Now, there are small, kind of minute differences between rank and stuff like that, but that's not what we're here to talk about. I just wanted to give you guys sort of an idea of what we're looking at. All right, so let's talk about their origin. They are a chimeric gene seed chapter. What that means is that they don't come from just one gene seed. They are a combination of two gene seeds, and they are a combination of Lionel Johnson's gene seed and Jagatai Khan's gene seed, which is a combination I have not heard of yet, which I think would be a cool one since they're two of my favorite Primarchs, and I thought that'd be an interesting combination. Now, the Black Cobras were a secret founding of Space Marines during the Ultima founding of the Imperium's history. Originally ordained by the Inquisition and a secret cabal of the Mechanicus, this illegal chapter was actually not intended to survive their first century of service. Rather, they were to act as a buffer to a perceived threat. See, a massive green-skinned force was anticipated to cross into Imperial space. So these new Primaris Marines were rushed through a chimeric gene seed creation process and founded on a planet on the edge of Imperial territory called Narahion. The chapter's purpose was to act as a buffer and initial target for the orcs to focus on. By the time the Navy could reinforce the area and fight back the tide, the Inquisition and the Mechanicus hoped that this new Astartes that they had created would be overrun and slain in the battle, and they would have bought the time required for the Imperium to gain the upper hand and break the orc advance. But fortunately for this fledgling chapter, the invasion never came. As the orcs were closing in on the planet, a Tyranid Splinterfeet entered the region of space and caught the orcs' attention first, and thus their forces were steered away to deal with the invasive bugs. This gave the new fledgling chapter the time to grow, evolve, and establish an identity on the planet, much to the surprise and disappointment of the Inquisition agents responsible for their existence, which leads to a future issue with the Inquisition, which we'll get into. Now, the forefathers of the chapter are not entirely aware of the source of their gene seed, but this matters little to them. As far as they're concerned, their purpose is to safeguard the Imperium and its citizens, and thus this has been their mantra. Their name would in time derive from a species of serpent native to Narahion called the Imugi. These massive 10-meter-long cobras are black in color with gleaming red eyes that are said to hypnotize their prey and lesser creatures. Now, though massively large and with lethal poison in their fangs, they are rarely hostile to humans. Why? Because they feed on these giant rodents that populate the forests of Narahion, known as the Neju. these rodents are dangerous to humans and will feed on them given the chance. So the people of Narayon venerate the giant cobras as guardians and protectors from the giant rodents. Their venom is highly prized and valuable, their scales are symbols of authority and royalty, and the governor's own palace has a full skin of an imugi, which is displayed in his palace at the entrance. It was from these majestic creatures that the Black Cobras were given their name, and like the great serpents for which they're named, they view themselves as the coiled cobras who defend humanity from the vermin that threaten it. It is their duty to never waver, to never retreat, and to die if necessary for the sake of the Imperium. Now, though the orcs did not end up being the downfall of the chapter, it wouldn't take long before the chapter was thrust into its first real conflict, only a few decades later. Due to Guilliman's sudden and powerful Indominus crusade, many Chaos warbands were forced to flee from his warpath, and one of these warbands was the Plague Apostles. They found their way to one of the moons of Narayon and began setting up shop. It was their goal to use it as a staging area for their invasion of the planet. They had no idea that the Black Cobras had been established there, and they were unprepared to face the fangs of their new enemies. Now, as you can probably guess from the Plague Apostles' name, they are mostly Plague Marines run by a war champion of Nurgle. We'll get to him in a second. The master of the Plague Apostles, Mortith Crowan, had taken almost full control of the moon by the time the Black Cobras were deployed. But upon their arrival, the Cobras were met with their first taste of real combat with the traitor band, and, to everyone's surprise, they performed exceptionally. It was in the midst of their war with the Apostles that a young Cobra, named Ieyasu Raigo, would see firsthand the true horrors of the Plague Apostles. Mortith Crone and his forces commandeered a hospital and repurposed it into a nightmarish laboratory where men, women, and children were experimented on in an attempt to create new plagues, pestilence, diseases, and warp-spawned abominations. They saw things that would turn your stomach. Think something a la Made in the Abyss. If you know anything about that anime, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And if you don't know anything about that anime, I don't recommend looking into it. It is really, really, really dark. I watched it. I regret watching it. Don't bother. Okay, I'm just saying. Now, the gruesome horrors that they saw were enough to turn the stomach of even some of the Sisters Hospitaller who had accompanied them to the facilities, and it also left a permanent mark on the psyche of all the Cobras, especially Raigo. On the blood of those dead children and citizens, Raigo swore a blood oath to kill Mortith Crowan. And all of the Cobras after that developed this identity of, we never want to see this happen to humanity again. See, one thing that I wanted to establish is the Cobras are good. They do care about the common man. They do care about average civilians, kind of like what the Salamanders and Lamenters do, but I don't want it to just be ingrained in their culture or their chapter beliefs. It's something they had to develop, and they developed it from seeing this. Their battle with Mortith Crowan and the Plague Apostles and seeing what they did to these civilians taught them to value human life, to protect humans, and that it is their responsibility to prevent such horrors from ever befalling citizens like this again. So it wasn't just something that, we're just good now. It was something that they gradually developed through this war with the Plague Apostles. So, with all that out of the way, what happened? Well, Raigo would get his chance to face Crowan. During his escape attempt, Raigo managed to catch up to Crowan, and the two engaged in a furious duel in the spaceport off the moon. Raigo fought valiantly, but the problem is Crowan was a seasoned veteran, one of the original Death Guard during the Great Crusade, revived again and again and again through the blessings of Nurgle. In the moment of near death, Raigo made a desperate gamble and detonated a pack of live grenades next to him, causing an explosion that nearly killed him along with Crowan. Crowan was severely injured and was exposed to a sudden and violent attack from a near-dead Raigo, which severely injured and basically nearly ripped off his right arm, the more human one. Crowan did manage to flee from the battle and escape into the warp, but his hate for Raigo and the Cobras has only increased, and he longs to spill the blood of Raigo and offer his head to Nurgle as a prize. So, we'll talk more about the Plague Apostles another time when I can do a whole video on their creation, but Mortith Crowan vowed an oath to Nurgle himself, saying, I will hunt and destroy the Cobras, give me the strength to do it. So Nurgle granted him a new form, which makes him look very rat-like, which has led to Mortith Crowan's nickname, the Rat King, or just the Rat. And in this, that's why he has that nickname, and that's why he's associated so much with vermin, which makes it a lot more metaphorical since you have the Black Cobras who hunt the Neju, the Imugi versus the Neju of the planet Narayon. So it's kind of a, metaphorical thing there. Now, For his deeds and as acknowledgement of his sacrifices, the Black Cobras elected Raigo to be their first chapter master, the King Cobra, Ieyasu Raigo. With their successful expulsion of the Plague Apostles, the deeds and capability of the Cobras was now without question. But many elements of the Inquisition still deemed them as a threat and had made official efforts to undermine or even eliminate them, which has put the Cobras in conflict with the Inquisition at times, as well as with Marine chapters who represent their interests or goals, including the Black Templars, the Sentinel Knights, and the Imperial Eagles, and even the Exalted Sons. And you might be thinking, I don't know a few of those names. That's because those are other bands of chapters that Lark and I have created over the years. We just decided to name drop them. Now, while not friends of the Inquisition, even the Space Wolves have had conflict with the Cobras, somehow having learned of their illegal formation and chimeric origin. Despite the fact that the Cobras work to keep their origin a secret, and the Inquisition attempting to suppress it themselves, somehow certain elements have been made aware of their origins, and this has irritated many within the ranks of the Cobras. So to kind of explain it, the Cobras don't want it gotten out that they were born through illegal means, that they were just created to just be a buffer against a bunch of orcs, but they managed to turn that around, and now they are a recognized chapter. You can't just outright destroy them now. You can't just outright say, oh, well, we're going to delete you, because they've already proven themselves capable, and Gilliman gives them the thumbs up, so they're good to go. So you can't just wipe them out, but the Inquisition is trying to undermine them, trying to get chapters to go against them, trying to convince the Imperium that they're no good, and the Cobras are having to deal with that. So the Cobras and the Inquisition are not friends in most cases. Now, some Inquisitors are fine with them, because you got to keep in mind, even though the Inquisition overall is kind of nuts, individuals within the Inquisition can be better or worse than others. Like, you can't look at the Inquisition as one big amalgamation. There are individuals who think and act differently. And if you need more information about that, I highly recommend reading stuff like the Eisenhorn novels or the Caiaphas Cain series, because they go into detail about how different Inquisitors work and how they view things. It's really fascinating, and I thought there could be some Inquisitors who are fine with the Cobras, others who hate them. You get my point. Now, despite their rough relationship with their cousins and the Inquisition, the Cobras have a reputation as staunchly loyal and devoted to the protection of mankind. They've been called upon in battles involving orcs, Tyranids, and Chaos forces. They will often respond quickest if they learn that the Plague Apostles are involved in a conflict, because they're eager to settle that blood feud with the Rat and his ilk. Their combat style is built around speedy action and brutal efficiency. A company will usually be deployed and sent to key locations on a battlefield to weaken strategic strongholds and points of tactical importance. At times, they'll abandon the facility they attack to bait their enemy into returning so that they can reclaim what they've lost, only to swoop in and eliminate the desperate foe. Other times, they'll starve out the opponent, gradually strangling them like snakes squeezing the life out of their prey. And once the Cobras close the gap and engage in melee, they are infamous for their use of power weapons, including power polearms and glaives, which the Mechanicums of Narahion specialize in producing. We'll talk about that a little bit later. The Black Cobras excel in close quarters combat and mid-range engagement, though they struggle in longer range battle, preferring to close the distance and force their prey into killing fields or zones that they can easily control. They also serve a second purpose. The reason they don't like range as much is because getting in close and forcing the enemy into a tight location where they're forced to fight up close and personal limits civilian casualties. Range has the horrible side effect of getting civilians caught in the crossfire. And like I said, they don't want to do that. As a result of witnessing the barbarism and horror of the Plague Marines that they dealt to the citizens of Narahion, the Cobras now have a staunch desire to prevent needless loss of human life, so others don't go through that terror. Therefore, the Cobras will go out of their way to reinforce hopeless positions and protect refugees, especially if they know that the Plague Apostles are nearby. In fact, many of the apothecaries among the Black Cobras carry with them specialized stems and treatments to stop specific plagues that the Rat is known for employing. So they are very desperate to cut off the Rat and everything he does. Now, the Black Cobras have some strained relations with various administratum and militarum elements, because the Cobras are not entirely linguistic in Gothic. All Cobras are fluent in the language of their homeworld, and many can understand High Gothic to an extent, but most don't speak Low Gothic, the more common form of Imperial speechcraft. This makes communication with the Cobras somewhat difficult. Further, the Cobras have little regard for the Codex Astartes. Though they do adhere to some of the rules out of necessity for, sake of practicality, they disregard tenets and ideals that they find disagreeable because of their origins and their lack of exposure to all of mankind's enemies. The Cobras suffer from a certain degree of naivete. There have been cases of Black Cobras being lured into traps by forces without proper preparation, such as when the Plague Apostles allowed their presence on a hive world to be known, specifically to draw the Cobras to them, which led to a bloodbath, which cost several Cobras their lives and more than 12,000 innocent civilians in the first conflict alone, as well as reducing the number of librarians among the Cobras from 23 to 8, a number they're still trying to bolster back up. The Cobras are also particularly noted, like I said before, for having a large number of power weapons, including the very rare power polearms, glaives, and spears. This is largely because the Mechanicus forging their weaponry on Narahone have knowledge and capability to create power weapons. It's a secret held closely on Narahone how they do this and what methods they use, and the Black Cobras help defend those secrets for them in exchange for exclusive access to their power weaponry. So that is how they get that going. In terms of cultural references, I drew a lot from East Asian reference. Now, here's the funny thing. I didn't just take from Japan. Many people think that they're just samurai marines. That wasn't the only focus. I did take some from Japanese culture, but I also borrowed some Chinese culture. I borrowed some Korean culture. I borrowed some Vietnamese culture. I was trying to kind of make an amalgamation of East Asian identity. Their language is an amalgamation of different phrases and words and lexicons within the within like those languages. I was trying to create something very unique that involved a broader identity of East Asian look. And yes, I do think that that ties in a little bit into Jagatai Khan, but I also wanted their beliefs and secrecy and, you know, kind of questionable origins to tie into the Dark Angels. So there was a lot that I wanted to combine in that look. So what can I really say is, and I'll try to wrap this up because I know I've been going on for a while, what I can really say that I love about the Black Cobras is how much I've gotten to play around with not only their look, but kind of this identity of these warriors who have a rough, very rough origin, had their first real trial and taste of battle kind of forge their identity and how they look at the world, forge how they view the Imperium, view people, and thus they behave based on that. And while they're definitely not perfect, they're naive, they make a lot of mistakes, they're at odds with a lot of other chapters because the Inquisition is kind of out to get them. On the other side of that, they are also very zealous, they're very strong, they don't back down, and they have proved themselves worthy contenders against known plague marines, which is not an easy feat. So I really had a great time kind of designing these. And sometime what I'll do is I'll do a video where not only do I talk about my homebrew Sister of Battle Order, the Order of the Sacred Spear, or talk about my homebrew Chaos Warband, the Plague Apostles, but I'd also like to talk about what steps I took in making them, like what things to think about. So we'll probably do that in another video. I'll let you know when, but I hope you guys enjoyed this. What do you guys think of the Black Cobras? Do you think that they're a cool chapter? Do you think that there's some stuff I should consider when writing more about them? Are there things that I missed, things that you think are unique? Let me know down in the comment section below. Would love to hear your thoughts. And that's all I have to say for today. Thank you guys so much, and I will see you in my next video. Take care.